Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. To continue on with this month's Pride Month celebration, we're going to be exploring another LGBTQ band, this one being Pupil Slicer, which I think we've had on the channel before, but the name's only vaguely familiar, so maybe we haven't. I know this song just came out. I think the requester was Johnny Truant, and they had mentioned that it was a recent release. So let's dive into this and see what's going on with Pupil Slicer's Dim Morning Light. Really interesting to have the snare only on 4. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Love that tom roll. Shifting off from 4/4 to 3/4, again emphasizing only 3, the last beat in the bar. Beautiful atmosphere on this. And now we're back to the 4. It's kind of gazy. There's a lot of textures going on that sort of create a wall of sound with all the musical elements. Some dissonance and microtonality going on as well in some of our wall of sounds. Really interesting in this part. We're in 4/4, but there's a heavy use of triplets, obtaining the 3 and the 4 simultaneously where they've been split before.
Regret will yet speak to me untrue. The chasm of my heart soon.
Interesting transition there from all gnarly to just vocal gnarly to no gnarly. The microtonality going on back here. Strong sense of atonality where, oh, wait, know what emotion we're in because I can't get a strong read on the key. The vocals allude to it, but the music destroys that understanding. Oh, we got a little bit of some synth work in here now. Vocal counterpoint. We're bringing back the drum bit from our opening. Okay. Really nice how they're finding ways to increase the intensity through the rhythm and texture here without removing any of the beauty of the atmosphere that they crafted in this chorus previously. Ooh. Interesting. Retardando into a held out note that is pointing us towards a full resolution, but never quite lets us have it. So I had actually thought that Pupil Slicer was a heavier band when I heard their name pop up at the beginning of this and was very surprised to find this to be very ethereal, gazy, bright, not bright, just beautiful, very elegant. And we did this for verse, chorus. Verse, chorus. I was like, oh, maybe they're turning over a new leaf. Maybe this is the ballad of the album. Maybe I don't know who they are. It wouldn't be the first time that I just completely got a band wrong. So I was pleasantly surprised when we hit the bridge and we introduced some of that heavier guitar work. We introduced the harsh vocals and things started to click. And I was like, oh, okay, this is probably a ballad on the track, or maybe they're pushing towards a softer sound. But this is a point in their, in their time as an artist to kind of meld heavier and softer stuff. Maybe eventually they'll go pure gaze, but they don't want to leave their heavier sounds completely behind quite yet. But yeah, this when we got to the bridge, I was like, this is the Pupil Slicer I was thinking of. So, man, that name too. Like you just say it because it's like the band name, and you're like, whatever. When you think about it, though, like, ugh, dude, that is an uncomfortable band name. All right. So our verse and our chorus and our intro are based around shoegazy type things. And for those who don't know, shoegaze is just very wall of sound, texture heavy stuff. Throughout this track, it's very difficult to hear individual instruments. What is the bass? What are the synths? What are the guitars? All you can really get is this fuzzy, hazy texture behind the vocals that the drums play around with. The drums are sitting around that sound and are outside of that wall entirely. They are in their own space where all the other instruments kind of fuse together into this foundational floor for the song. But what's interesting is that normally we would call it the foundational floor. It's your chords and your baseline atmospheric stuff that the song is built on top of. But this takes over the entire song. This is what gaze does, and I don't really think I've found some really good vocabulary yet to talk about music that does this. It is both the chordal foundation and the atmosphere and the ornamental aspects all in one. It is not a floor, it is literally a wall. I'm blocking my own voice now. It is a wall of sound that permeates every aspect of the track. Um, maybe, I mean, I've always called it a wall of sound, but I think a wall versus a floor actually works with my old rhetoric or with my current rhetoric as well. So, yeah, maybe we just stick with that. Anyways, this sound dictates the emotional aspect of the song and of the listener. What's really interesting here is I had a tough time really nailing down what that was. It is bright in some times, but a bit weary in others, and melancholic in other places. It's a flurry of emotions and sounds that also get wrapped up into an atonality. There's so many instruments in here, or sounds that feel atonal. They lack a core. They work outside of the key signature in ways to introduce dissonance into the sound while also working outside of any component of key. They might rise up in one key and fall down in another, creating a circular pattern of atonality. It makes the emotional read of this track really difficult to figure out. It is, like I mentioned, kind of all over the place. It has highs, it has mids, it has lows, and it also doesn't have a core. It doesn't have a home. There's nothing that I can really base everything else off of, and it's called Dim Morning Light, and I've been thinking about this for most of the track. I don't know yet. Maybe the lyrics will help unlock some of this stuff, but just to me, it is a song without a center. It is a song that is a plethora of emotions, and I don't want to say that it doesn't know what it wants to be, but it wants to be a lot of different things. And I think that what the listener brings to the table is also going to influence what they get out of it. In that sense, it's just sort of a vague atmosphere that is ripe for projecting your own feelings onto. Now, outside of the wall of sound, we have technically the vocals. They are existing outside of the wall of sound. They are clearly heard as separate from the wall, but they are also heavily ethereal with tons of production put on top of them in a very gazy kind of sound, while also fluctuating what type of sounds are put on them. Textures, I think is the word I want. Effects. There we go. The vocals can be ethereal and hazy and airy. At other times, it can be very full bodied. We also have some sections that are full of reverb. We have call and response. We have very clear yet compressed sounds as well once we bring in some of the harsh vocals. The vocals end up being a lot of everything and kind of lose a general sense of identity as well. It merges very well with the emotional resonance of the atmosphere, in that it kind of covers so many bases that it ends up not covering any, and is sort of a blank slate to take out of it whatever you want. I do think, though, that it is important to remember that all of these don't apply all at once, and it might be important to feel the atmosphere and look at what effects are put on the vocals at any given time relating to what is being said at that moment. It could be that the song shifts with specific vocal lines. I don't know, and I won't know. When I get into the lyrics, I will be reading them completely devoid from the music, and it'll be, I won't have the opportunity to figure out what is being said when in the track, but I figure that that might be something to look forward to on a second listen. Finally, we have the drums, which are honestly the highlight for me, specifically because they gave me something solid and tangible to latch onto and dig into analytically. I think the song works phenomenally from a casual perspective, or maybe even a musician's perspective. If you are familiar with the types of effects and pedals that these people might be using on their instruments in order to achieve this, you might be able to gain insight into how they craft their sound and replicate it yourself if that's something you want to do. As a pure composer, there's not a lot for me to grab onto. A lot of it is hidden beneath the texture. Um, it's very difficult for me to latch onto most of what's going on within the wall of sound, and the drums being both clear and concise in the production while also having technical elements to it other than just chordal information, which is primarily what the wall is doing. It worked very well for the way that I listen to music in this setting. And so I got to hear the variety of volumes that the drummer utilizes, everything from ghost notes to accents. I got to listen to accent patterns, shifting rhythmic ideas, and that was really interesting too. Let me just say one last thing. The tom run. There's two distinct tom runs in here, and they were gorgeous. I loved it. It's super tight. It's almost robotic, but there's also a human element to the rolls that feel like breathing. It is just every single time they came up, it was just such a relief because the music, it creates a type of tension. I don't necessarily think that's the intention of it, but I found that I often forgot to breathe when I paid attention to the wall of sound, and listening to these drum rolls was like a breath of fresh air. It allowed me to recenter myself and find something that I could grasp onto. And that could very well be just a me experience because of the way that I'm listening to the music in this context, but that is what it felt like to me, is a rare moment every minute or so to be reminded, bro, take a breath. So yeah, just wonderful stuff. Now, what was like? Oh yeah, time signature, rhythmic stuff. This was interesting because the wall of sound kind of just does its own thing. For the most part, it feels like they transition chords on beat one, whatever the time signature is. But I don't know that I found a pattern. If it was like every 4 bars or every 8 bars or 5 bars, if they wanted to get odd, I don't know. But what I could always rely on was rhythmic information and the rhythmic cadence of the song from the drums. It's what keyed me into the 4/4 in our verse and intro and our 3/4 in our chorus. I also noticed that regardless of what our time signature was, we tended to accent the last beat of a bar, which is so very unusual. I am quite curious what the intention is behind that. Usually, if you will accent one beat in a bar, it is beat one. Even when I tend to count to you all to emphasize time signature, I end up saying, we'll take the 3/4 here, for example. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It is just so built into me that if anything gets emphasized, it will be the 1. It dictates a beginning. And so for 1, 2, and 3 to get ignored and just give an accent on 4 feels very lopsided. It feels very strange. It feels very back heavy. It is an interesting decision by itself. It is a perplexing decision when we shift to 3/4 and we put our accent on 3 as well. I'm very curious as to what this means to the drummer or to the band. All I see is an emphasis on the end, which could be extrapolated in so many thematic ways. More interesting, the song is called Dim Morning Light, which for most people is the beginning of a day. So yeah, I have no idea what's going on there, but it is just stuck in my mind. I can't not think about it. We also have the 4/4 with triplet primarily present in our bridge, which I thought was a really nice way of unifying these. If you stick with the tempo that we've stuck with the whole song, you're going to count 4/4, but if you follow the pulse of what's happening, you're going to get a faster 3 out of it. And I'm curious if this song is about some sort of division and the bridge is about bringing it together, which is also interesting because the bridge is about bringing more together than just that. As I mentioned during the reaction, the bridge introduced our harsher, heavier guitar line and it introduced the harsh vocals. Eventually, we swapped the guitar work back out for the hazy shoegaze wall of sound stuff while keeping the aggressive vocals. It was a quieter section, mixing the beauty of the music with the harshness of the vocals. And eventually, we removed the harshness as well and went from the harsh vocals and went back to the beautiful ethereal on both sides. For a moment in the bridge, we paired the beautiful atmospheric stuff with this gnarly heaviness. So we found a bridge between our time signatures, and we found a bridge between the two sides of the music here. Now, I don't know that that's such a strong read because we don't get the heavy in the vocals or the music prior. It's not like we were constantly jumping back and forth like we were with the 4 and the 3 and then eventually found a midpoint. We just sort of introduced harsh stuff and then found a midpoint and then went back to the usual, which feels more like a neat transition idea than a thematic one. But I wouldn't be surprised if they said in an interview or anything that the purpose of the bridge was to find a medium point between several components of the track, and that was one of them. And then, like I had mentioned earlier, the outro is not fully resolved. There is a type of resolution to it. It is not totally tense, but it is a leading tone that points us towards somewhere we never end up going. So, for all of the emphasis on the ending with our accented hits in the drums, we never actually reach a conclusion harmonically in the track. I don't know if they put any of this in there purposefully or not, but there's a lot of focus on beginnings and endings with this track that I can't help but notice a pattern, though I'm not keen enough to figure out what the connection is. So with all that said, lyrics. Lyrically, the song seems to be about not really beginnings or endings. It seems to hyper focus on toxic relationships where our narrator always gets the short end of the stick. There is one part in the bridge that says, "Destroy my desires, eradicate my ideals, show me something better, and I will follow you." We do have a call and response going on here, which is where I had mentioned the vocal counterpoint. The second voice says, "Mutilate me, desolate me, dominate me, suffocate me." I'm not sure if I should be reading this positively or negatively. To me, in a vacuum, this feels very negative because it talks about self erasure in order to follow someone else. There's also the idea of mutilating and desolating and dominating and suffocating, which are usually utilized in negative connotations. But this is also paired with the chorus, which says, "I always thought it true. Tell me the words. Say that I can fix this. Warm comfort when I'm with you. Lead me astray. Turn my meaning endless," which feels very mixed. There's parts of this that say that this person wants to be with this other person, and there's others that almost seem self reflective at the loss of self here. Lead me astray and turn my meaning endless. But then the very next line, our first verse says, "And when I think it gets better, that our time's through, break my bones and see." To me, this is once again leading into the toxicity of the relationship. It says that, when I think it gets better, which is to me when I think that our relationship is mending. when the negativity of it is gone. You'll break my bones and I'll see that it's the same as it always was. It's about keeping the narrator down and dependent on the other person. At least that's my read of it, but there's still a few lines in here. And I think it's not necessarily wanting this controlling relationship to be in this way. They might be fine being the less dominant one in the relationship, but there is a negativity to the entire experience that is soul crushing to them. But they still keep coming back to it. And I think they understand that. There's a self reflection here that this is what they keep doing, but there isn't a path out to improve the situation, which I think is where the lack of conclusion comes in this track. There is no end in sight, even though they recognize a problem with the situation. Anyways, those are just my thoughts on Pupil Slicer's Dim Morning Light, which the title kind of makes less sense to me now. Yeah, I don't know. But let me know what you thought. Put your comments, opinions, perspectives, agreements, disagreements down in the comment section. Above that, in the description, you'll find a link for Linktree. It takes you to this menu. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for this. Remember to come back tonight at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC to check out the regularly scheduled album review. We also have our live stream tomorrow morning for the patrons, and as long as YouTube is cooperative, I'll have it out tomorrow evening for everyone else. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.